Good afternoon, everyone. We are all 49ers writers, Grant Cohn and Jack Hammer, and we're going to be comparing the current 49ers Super Bowl contender to the Super Bowl team of 2 years ago. Is this team better? Is it worse? Where does it stand? We're going to start by talking about the team in total and then go player by player and focus on the D-line because that was the X factor for the Niners team 2 years ago. Jack, thanks for joining me. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How you doing today, Grant?
I'm hanging in there. So should we get right into it?
Yeah, okay. Let's go ahead and jump into it. And
how does this roster compare to the roster that went to the Super Bowl, in your opinion?
I think if you have to take this and let's take a look at it position by position, group by group, because I think if you start off with the quarterbacks, you have Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo. Those are your top two guys. And I think everybody would agree that that's better than what they had in 2019 with Garoppolo and Mullins, even though we never saw Mullins on the field at that point.
Yes. Yes.
So quarterback is an improvement. As we go through this, we're also projecting some stuff, right? Because we don't know what Lance is yet. When we look at the running back room, we don't know what Trey Sermon is exactly yet. But if you just look at that group seems to be, if not as good, maybe a little bit better because you've still got Mostert back there. He's going to be your game breaker. Sermon would be taking the place. Would be your kind of maybe your starter that's going to be able to beat up the defense a little bit. And then you have a couple of other guys there that kind of fill in that third running back role who doesn't get used a lot. But I think both of those groups are at least the same, maybe a little bit better. And then you jump to the receivers. And at the wide receiver position, there's definitely an improvement there. Even though we have questions on who the number 3 wide receiver is going to be. If you go back to 2019, week 1, you got to remember week 1 of 2019, you had Marquise Goodwin as a starter opposite of Deebo Samuel, who started the week 1 as a rookie. And so that was your starting lineup. And so there's definitely an improvement there as well because Brandon Ayuk is a huge upgrade over Marquise Goodwin. So I think on the offensive side, even if we jump to the offensive line, it's the same way. You've got a center. Alex Mack is much better than what they had in 2019. And I think that Aaron Banks is going to prove out to be better than Mike Person as well. So I think on the offensive side of the ball, you're better across the board, really. And then when you go to the defensive side, the secondary is pretty much the same. The only guy that's changed out is Jason Verrett taking the place of Richard Sherman. If you remember back when Sherman first joined the 49ers, we weren't sure of his ability to stay healthy. He did for the most part in 2018 and 2019. And Mosley, ended up taking over that other cornerback role anyway. So I think they're better and they're as good in the secondary, maybe a little bit better because Verrett's an upgrade over Richard Sherman.
Yeah.
Linebackers are about the same because you've got Dre Greenlaw, who proved out to be better than Quan Alexander. That's why they got rid of Alexander and replaced him with Greenlaw. The one spot that I don't know of, I don't think they're quite as good as the defensive line. I think that's where you see the difference between 2019 and 2021. And I know we're projecting here, but you still have Nick Bosa coming off of an injury. Even if he gets back to the same level as he was the year before, is he going to get back to 9 sacks? We don't have Dee Ford. There's no Dee Ford on the field, but you have Samson and Ebukam. Is Ebukam going to be able to give you 6.5 sacks like Ford gave you that season? Yeah. And then inside, is Javon Kinlaw going to be able to give you 5 to 7 sacks? I can't remember exactly what those numbers were inside, but they were. I know for a fact that the guy he replaced, which was DeForest Buckner, he had 7.5 sacks. So are they going to be able to somehow manufacture, we're looking at about 10, the sacks that they've lost, Ronald Blair had 3, Solomon Thomas had 2. So if you just think of that as those guys as interior guys, especially Thomas, that was 2, plus 7.5 by Buckner. So that's 9.5. And Jones had 2 as well. So are they going to be able to manufacture about 12 sacks from those interior players? And that could be tough considering Javon Kinlaw probably isn't going to get you more than 4 or 5 sacks.
Right.
What do you think?
Well, we're going to get into our Javon Kinlaw expectation in a minute and really focus on him. But I think in terms of the big picture differences of these two teams, I agree the D line is a big one. Um, and I think the depth is another. I think that other team was a little deeper. I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo was cheaper. George Kittle was way cheap. Fred Warner was still cheap. Who else? DeForest Buckner was cheap. DeForest Buckner was on the fourth year of his rookie deal. His cap hit was $5 million. So I think their money might have been a little bit more evenly distributed. I mean, Tavares Moore still had 2 Achilles tendons and all that. So there's that. And then also the X factor of losing Salah is the other thing. But really, I do think this team is quite similar to the one. You pointed out how they're better in certain places, especially on offense. I agree. I do think Jason Verrett is a big-time upgrade over Richard Sherman. So I could see that it's actually pretty close. The only real loss they lost Kendrick Bourne. I don't know that they have a real replacement for him yet, but I don't know if they don't either. They might. Sanu, Jennings, it could be. They might have him. So it's closer than you think. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right. And I didn't take into account the fact that the coaching changed on the defense, because I think that that is a big point.
That's an X factor
that I think we're overlooking. Yeah, that's a big X factor.
Okay, so let's talk about Javon Kinlaw in particular. He's entering year 2. Just got a lot of praise from Brian Baldinger, who does his homework and knows what he's talking about. Showed all of his nice plays, and what you can see from Javon Kinlaw is he can be very good against the run. He's very big, he's hard to move, he's very strong, and he changes directions well. He's pretty fast for his size. Very good run defender. The question is, what kind of potential does he have as a pass rusher? What's your expectation from him in year 2?
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at Kinlaw, because as you mentioned, the strengths are his athleticism. He's extremely powerful, and he's got really long arms, as long as they're almost 35 inches long.
Yeah.
And I think all that helps him really, with his run defense. He does a really good job of getting those arms extended and shedding and be able to chase down the running backs. That's where he shows his athleticism. But I agree with you 100%. The weak part of his game is the pass rush. And this goes back to, even in college, he wasn't a really much of a premier pass rusher. And so when you watch him, his biggest weakness is
how he won as a pass rusher in college and now. I mean, it's not with finesse and multiple moves strung together, is it?
No, there's not. And that's kind of where I was going to go. Is he doesn't have the moves. He's pretty much a bull rush guy. He's pretty much going to he's basically just trying to drive the center or guard back into the quarterback, and then shed him and chase him down. But he doesn't have a swim move. He doesn't really have anything other than that pass rush move, the bull rush move that he can go to and win consistently.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. Some of the stuff that he does well doesn't show up in the stats, right? We talk about sacks and quarterback hits, both numbers. He only had 4 quarterback hits all year last year, and his sacks all came in one game. But there was one play in particular against the Rams when I did a breakdown last week that stood out to me, and that was one where they had him working with the defensive end on a little bit of a game on the outside, and it was just timed up so perfectly that as Hyder got into the tackle and guard, he came right around the edge, and his athleticism, if he had just driven himself into the quarterback, I think he gets a sack, but instead Goff escapes up the field. It turns out to be the play that Ward hits him and he fumbles, and Hyder gets the recovery. So there's no stat that shows what a good play that was by Kinlaw, but that's an example. If they can use him in that manner where he's just using his athleticism, it might be a way to kind of help him generate some numbers that he didn't get last year.
Now that we've been talking about him, I mean, the long arms, the ability to lock out and shed and pursue, he'd be such a good fit in a traditional 3-4, wouldn't he?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that he's so
really
big.
Kind of suit him.
He's so big and his pad level's a little high, so I question his ability to really shoot gaps. But in a 3-4, he'd be fantastic at two-gapping straight up. I think he's a terrific two-gap. And it seemed to me the highlights that Baldinger were posting was Kinlaw basically two-gapping and controlling a guy and both gaps. That's great. It's a rare skill. You don't really see guys being able to do that anymore.
Yeah, well, he should be able to shoot. He should be able to play gaps hard, and you see him do that at times where he kind of gets up in there. He's got the athleticism, so he's got this explosiveness to do it. It's just a matter of, especially in pass rush situations, you'd like to see him doing that more. He just doesn't really. You watch film with the defensive line, and it's almost as if Contavious Street is a better interior pass rusher than Javon Kinlaw, at least last year.
So where's the best spot for Kinlaw on 3rd and 7? Where would you put? Which technique would you play him at?
I'd want shoot, if I'm going to have to play him on pass rushing downs, I'm going to probably be working him. I'd like to work him over with Nick Bosa and have those two kind of, because Bosa has that ability to start out wide and really force, play up inside, right? We've seen him do that, and I think those two over there could really do some nice games together. To where they could really cause some problems for the offensive linemen. So that may be where we see his improvement come from in 2021, because that's the side he's going to play on anyway, I believe.
How many sacks would you expect from Kinlaw?
I'm going to say if the 49ers can get 4 to 5 sacks out of Kinlaw, I think they've got to be really happy. I think if you can get more than that out of him, I think you're ecstatic, because I think those would be huge numbers for a guy that's never really been a big sack guy, even in college.
Yeah, and I think his sack production will kind of depend on where he is in the pecking order. Like if he's the 4th rusher and the other 3 guys on the line are really causing havoc, he could get a lot of sacks just because of the matchups. But if he's, if Armstead isn't producing and Dee Ford's out, and Ebukam's not producing, and Nick Bosa's out, then I think you'll see, him get shut out the way he did last year. That's just my feeling. I don't think he's, because I mean Buckner was the kind of guy who could actually get sacks even if he was the only good player on the defensive line. I don't see that Kinlaw being that kind of guy, but he could definitely be like Armstead, where if he's the 3rd or 4th best rusher on the line, he could get 10 sacks.
Yeah, he could. And when you look at the couple of sacks that he got last year, they were both in situations, kind of like you said, where he's kind of cleaning up. Because both times were against New Orleans were when the backups were in the game, and so those guys are kind of holding the ball, bouncing around, not getting the ball in their hands as quickly, and so he's able to get in and make the sack. So I think you're right. If the other 3 guys are wreaking havoc, then that might help him get his numbers up.
Yeah. So I think it's important to remember that he's basically a run defender by nature. He does have some potential as a pass rusher, the way that Arik Armstead has potential as a pass rusher. I mean, I wouldn't write off Arik Armstead. He could have 10 sacks this year, but he's never going to be the same kind of player that Buckner is. There's just a difference. And I think maybe you could say that Kinlaw's a better run defender than Buckner. I think he is a better run defender than Buckner. He's heavier, harder to move.
I think they're different players in that Buckner's inside, or not Buckner, but Armstead is he's on the outside, so he's kind of setting the edge. And so he's a really good run defender on the edge, and you've got Kinlaw, who's more of a really good run defender inside. So that's really where they kind of complement each other. It'll be interesting to see them rush next to each other inside, because that's where Armstead gets his work done, is on the inside. And that's you go back and you watch them play, and it's almost as if you just need to get Javon Kinlaw and Arik Armstead to really work on some techniques together. Because if Kinlaw can minimize, because when you watch Armstead, he's got a great swim technique. He does a really good job of getting himself thin through the pass rush to get through the line of scrimmage, and that's really kind of what we're talking about with Kinlaw, right? The swim technique, kind of being able to rip, but as you're ripping, you're turning your shoulders and getting skinny in the hole. So, Kinlaw needs to get his pass rushing game up to where Armstead's is from the inside.
Maybe instead of hunting squirrels, he can hang out with Armstead and DeForest Buckner in Hawaii and learn Buckner's technique. I don't know. I'm just saying. But last thing I want to ask you before we move on, who do you think's a better player right now, Javon Kinlaw or DJ Jones?
I would rather see DJ Jones taking those reps, because DJ Jones to me has always been a really good player. He's a big guy, but he moves really well.
He shoots.
I would almost say that. Yeah, he's
me,
way quicker.
I wouldn't just force Kinlaw into a 3-down role just because you took him with the 14th pick. That's irrelevant now. That's in the past. I want the 4 best rushers on the field, and I'm not sure that he's one of the 2 best interior pass rushers. Armstead's one. DJ Jones could be the other. Kevin Givens could be the other. So I'd like to see that he actually earns it, because Solomon Thomas got a lot of reps he didn't deserve as a pass rusher. He was, I understand having him on the field as a run defender, but I'd like to see that with Kinlaw too. Earn it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I personally, I would go as far as to say that Kevin Givens and Contavious Street are both better pass rushers from the inside right now than Kinlaw.
I forgot Street. Street's good. He's explosive.
Yeah, and it's funny because I've been breaking down a couple of the games, because if you remember, kind of the middle of the season was when folks got really excited about the performance of Kinlaw. So I looked at his games against the Saints and the Rams.
Yeah.
Shoot, against the Rams, he only played 21 downs. There was long stretches of that game where it was just Givens and Street playing the whole way through.
Wow. And those guys are good, honestly. I mean, it just, in hindsight, nothing against Kinlaw, but they actually didn't have a need. I know it seemed crazy. You're losing DeForest Buckner. He's the best player on your team. Arguably, you got to replace that spot. Yeah, but Street, Givens, Jones, they're all good. So if only they had gotten worse. But, hey, that's not what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, real quick, though, when you look at that, they weren't sure what they were going to get from Street because he was coming back from that injury. And he just barely played a little bit at the end of 2019. And who was Kevin Givens? So they weren't quite sure. Correct. Yeah. And those guys both kind of came on and they've made that position almost expendable.
Yeah. Oh, well. All right. Let's talk about another player on the defensive line. What should we expect from Nick Bosa coming off his third major surgery? Torn ACL. He also tore his other ACL in high school, and he had a major core muscle surgery in college.
Yeah, I think the expectations for Bosa should be that his role in the defense is probably going to be minimized a little bit. I think it's safe to say that they're going to have him on some kind of a reduced snap count, at least early on.
Yeah, at least early on.
It's going to, at least in the first half of the early part of the season, because if they're able to get away with that, it's going to pay off big dividends for them down the road.
True. I'm just looking. You remember Nick Bosa in 2019, his rookie year, was coming off a similar situation. He had played 2.5 games in 2018, got hurt, shut it down. So he did have, he really did play a lot his rookie year. He played, snap counts. He played 76% of the snaps. So I think the expectation for Nick Bosa should be that by the end of the season, he finishes around 75% of the snaps. If he needs a few games to get his feet underneath him, fine. But I don't look at him as being someone the Niners have to think about 10 years in the future. He's had 3 major surgeries, and if he has one more, even if it's 4 years from now, you might look at him differently. So the way I look at him is you got him on this rookie deal now, and he's a relative bargain right now. Get the most out of him, man. And if he can stay healthy, good. If he can't stay healthy, that's good to know, because now you've prevented yourself from giving a huge contract to someone who shouldn't get it. So take your time, get ramped up. I'd like to see 75%. I'd like to see him have a 2019 season. I don't want to – he's 23 years old. I know he's gone through a lot, but he's only cheap for 2 more years. You got to play, man. You got to play, Nick. Is that harsh?
And if he can come – no, I don't think so. I think
okay.
You need to see him perform, because they're getting to that point, right, where you're going to have to. I think at the end of this year, they're going to have to make some decisions on his 5th-year option and things like that. So he's going to have to show that he can stay healthy, and it'll be interesting. And I think I don't know if we're going to talk about Samson Ebukam, but I think that's going to be really key as to Nick Bosa's what he's able to bring to the table as well, because. If you look back at his numbers from 2019, both him and Arik Armstead really struggled without Dee Ford on the field. So they need Ebukam to be Dee Ford again, because they need that other guy on the opposite side of the line of scrimmage to help them not have double 2 guys on them.
Okay, well then maybe we should talk about Samson Ebukam. What do you think? Hold on. Let's get his numbers out real quick. Hold on. This is a guy that the Niners clearly admired from afar, having played him twice a year. Good all-around player. The Rams never really made him a third-down pass rusher, and when he became a free agent, they let him walk. In his 4 years, he has 14 sacks. I think the Niners feel like there's something there, like there's some potential. And unless I'm misreading the situation and they just wanted to see him as a base linebacker as well. What should we expect from Samson Ebukam? Is he going to have like a rebirth?
It sounds to me like, from the things that he said, that his primary role is going to be as a pass rusher more than as a linebacker.
Okay.
And if that's the case, if they use him in that Dee Ford role, I could see him matching, doing very well, because I think he had 4 sacks each of the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Am I correct on that?
Yes.
And I'm sure that he was getting less snaps than what we would expect him to get in San Francisco if he's playing opposite of Nick Bosa all the time. If his snaps go up, probably I'd say at least 50% over what they've been in the past, we should expect him to get to 6 or 7 sacks this year.
Well, look at this. I got the number for you. So the last 2 seasons combined, he had 4.5 sacks in 19, 4.5 sacks in 20. That's 9 sacks combined in those 2 seasons. He played 900 snaps. So, I mean, that's about a season's worth. And he had 9 sacks. So maybe there is something there.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking, is if he can play, if they can get him, 600 snaps, that, we should be looking at somewhere around 6 to 7 sacks this season.
Yeah, and it's interesting. They always played him at outside linebacker. And when I watch him rush the quarterback, he plays like an outside linebacker, locking out, stacking, shedding. There's no real moves there. But now that they're making him a full-time defensive lineman, what he's going to do every day in practice isn't working on like the tackling shit, like the blocking shit, things that I'm forgetting what they're called.
The shedder, the shed, yeah.
The thing that he's going to be working on pass rushing moves every day with Chris Koster. The sled, it's a sled. Yes, he's not going to be on that anymore. He's going to be with Chris Koster working on pass rush moves. So he's never even done this before. There may be a total upside there. He's been winning with sheer effort before.
Mm-hmm. And even if he doesn't really, even if that's what he continues to win with is the effort, I think it's a huge plus for them, because that makes him so tough against guys like Russell Wilson or Kyler Murray, all these guys that the 49ers have really struggled against in the past, because he's so good at that. And that's, you and I broke some film down of him, and that's what we saw in film, if I recall, was certainly him being able to keep even Patrick Mahomes in the pocket back in 2019, I think it was.
Because again, I think he's not going to necessarily win off his first move. So he could get blocked, but he's relentless. There's a second effort, there's a third effort, and if he's blocked, he's not going to let lose containment. Unlike someone I know on the 49ers, he's going to actually play sound, and if the guy scrambles, he's going to race him down. He's great late in the down. The thing is, he's replacing Dee Ford, who's not that kind of player. Dee Ford had one good effort really to give, and it was explosive off the snap. He was the first one in the backfield. If he didn't get there, he caused havoc and allowed other people. It was kind of the formula that he was the first one in there. He would run in fast like Leroy Jenkins, cause chaos, and other people would clean up, including Nick Bosa. I don't see that being Samson Ebukam. I don't know who it's going to be. They still don't have that. I mean, Dee Ford's pretty rare. He was kind of like Von Miller. It's hard to get that guy. So
yeah, no, you're correct on that, because he doesn't have that. He doesn't have the same explosiveness.
Yeah, the get off, all of it.
But his biggest thing is, and why he's such a key, and I wrote about that last week, is that he's going to get Arik Armstead inside, and that's where Armstead's going to win. And I think if he can be out there and do his deal, you're going to start getting more pressure up the middle with Armstead, and that's going to start flushing guys out for Ebukam to get his sacks. And Bosa's not a slouch either with being able to get up there and move the quarterback around. So it's going to be interesting to really see how they juggle it. I mean, it would be cool to see a situation where they even put in Arden Key with Bosa out there, and maybe slide Bosa inside a couple times, and all kinds of different fun combinations you can put together, it sounds like.
All right, I'm adding new topics because you keep bringing them up. So Arik Armstead, he's sliding inside this. We don't know if it's going to be Ebukam, Dee Ford. We're going to talk about Dee Ford after. But Arik Armstead, we think he's going to be back where he should be, rushing from the interior like he did in 2019 when he led the Niners in sacks. Do you think he'll lead the Niners in sacks again? Do you think he'll be back in around 3 or 4 sacks? What should we expect from Arik Armstead this year?
Well, I expect him to be definitely over 3 or 4. I think this is we're almost like I think this is almost another contract year for him in a lot of ways because I think that the Niners can get out of his contract after this year if they want to. I know there'll be some dead money, but I think this is another prove it year for him in a lot of ways. And so if he wants to get his money or get more money, he needs to go out there and show it again this year. And being able to possibly, if he can get inside more often, I would expect, if he doesn't come up with 7+ sacks and he's playing that inside role more often like he's supposed to be, I think it would be definitely a down year for him and one that people should look at as a negative.
I know that the stats said that he faced a lot of double teams in 2019, like the most in the league. And that's from Pro Football Focus, and they never really give context because they want you to give them money, and they still don't give you context. But I think what was going on a lot from watching film, we watched film a lot together, on third down in particular, you're using weird fronts. It's not like you're using a 4-3 or a 3-4. You got people all over the place. It looks like gumballs and stuff, and you're trying to conceal where the pass rush is coming from. What Saleh did a lot was put Buckner in the A gap. And the function of doing that was Buckner's so dominant, that pretty much 100 times out of 100, the center's going to slide to his side. They're not going to get cute and try to bring a guard over. It's Buckner. So if if you can dictate where the offensive line will slide, then you can really get nasty with your blitz packages because you can sort of predict how the whole dominoes are going to fall, right?
Yes.
So by doing that with Buckner, I think he got Armstead some pretty good one-on-ones on the backside of the play. And it helped. I don't know that Kinlaw has the same effect on offensive blocking schemes. So I think there may be more focus on Eric, is what I'm trying to say. There may be more focus on Arik Armstead this season than there was in 2019. So maybe 6 sacks is a more reasonable expectation than 9 or 10.
Yeah. I think you're right on that. I remember you did a really good breakdown after, I think it was the Green Bay game, of showing some of what you're just talking about, where he was moving guys around because it freed up the slot corner to make it in there and make the blitz. The one I think where they caused the fumble early in the game. Yeah. But anyway, I see what you're saying, and that's an important point too, where not having a guy that has the name of Buckner, kind of hurts you a little bit unless these other guys can step up and really make the plays. You're not, because the way that they're kind of construed put together constructed right now is Bosa's going to get double teamed, and then all these other guys are, they're going to double team one other guy, but and it's probably going to be Armstead because Kinlaw hasn't shown that he can do it yet. Ebukam hasn't shown that he can be a consistent pass rusher yet. He's shown that he's good, but he's not a guy that you're really concerned with maybe throwing the running back on his side because he can't run around the edge. So, I can see where that could be an issue. I still go back to it with Armstead. You're paying this guy $20 million this year, I think it is. And if you're paying him $20 million and he's only able to generate 6 sacks, I think that's to
be fair, Arik Armstead's his cap hit doesn't go up big time until next year. I think it's at about like 12 right now, which is reasonable for him. I think it's reasonable. Okay. Let me get it. Yeah, it's 12.4. It goes up to 20 next year, which is next year is 21.7. After that is 23.2. Whew, that's boy. The cap is going to have to go up big time for that to be worth it. That's what they're counting on when they gave him that contract, that the cap will be going through the roof because of the TV deal. Well, we'll see. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah. I'm a year ahead of myself on that because you're right because he's only in year 2 of that deal. So that's correct.
He's decent right now. Really, the only person that's super overpaid right now in the Niners is Dee Ford, who we're going to talk about, and Jimmy. Everyone else is pretty good this year. It's going to get weird the next couple of years because a lot of deals were backloaded. So maybe the Niners can renegotiate some of them. You can always do things like that. You get creative.
Yeah, that's where when you get yourself into trouble because like we talked a lot, during the season last year about them needing to move on from Garoppolo to sign all these guys, and then next thing you know, they've re-signed everybody anyway. Yeah. But a lot of that is the cap played into their favor where they got guys back on these really cheap deals that are really should be worth more than they're getting.
I want to say one more thing. The thing about Buckner and his name, I think that was a big thing about it. It wasn't that Buckner. He's great, but If you put him in the A gap, the center's going to freak out. It's DeForest Buckner. I know who that is. I'm sliding that way. And the whole thing is when you're trying to design an overload blitz on third down, right? You're trying to figure out, okay, I'm going to bring 4 rushers from this side. And they're only going to have 3. They're only going to have 3 blockers. I guarantee it. Well, you can only say that if you know that Buckner's going to force the slide one way. Then you can say, I'm pretty freaking sure I'm going to overload him with an extra rusher. If you have some guy who's not Buckner there, I mean, you can't say for certain that where that center is going to slide, and all of a sudden your overload blitz may just not work. So that's why that's the Buckner effect, and why Bosa will have his own effect. It's not exactly the same because the center's not involved with blocking Bosa.
Yep. Yeah, and it's the same. And it's the same thing with Dee Ford and Ebukam, is that people knew that Dee Ford was a problem. No, I don't know if anybody's really concerned with Samson Ebukam at this point in his.
He's gonna have to prove it.
The year.
Yeah. All right. Final guy on the D line we need to talk about, the forgotten man, the invisible man, Dee Ford. The Niners renegotiated his contract, actually extended it this year. They lowered his cap hit. It's still high, $8.9 million. You'd like to get something for that. That's a lot of money. He's one of the highest paid players on the team. He essentially didn't play last year. They said he'd be coming back, then we never heard from him. It's a back injury, a neck injury that's been hurting him, affecting him his whole career. What do you think we should expect from Dee Ford this year? They say he's in good shape. They say he's around.
I think that, the thing it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Ford is how they play this with him. I don't think we're going to see him on the field early in the season. I think they're going to have to come up with some way to kind of get him onto the roster and kind of hide him there, because I think there's a deal this year where if you have a guy that's on your team and you release him and bring him back or something like that, you can actually carry 2 extra guys. I think you can actually carry 55, but there's some roster moves that need to play into being able to add those 2 extra players. And if they can do that with Ford, that'd be great. If they can somehow carry him on the 55-man, like get him as an extra guy on their roster at 54, 55 and carry him through to the second half of the season. I think that's really what you're hoping, is so that he can get out there and play for you over the last 6 weeks of the season, maybe, to help you kind of down the stretch.
That sounds good. Save him for the last 6 weeks of the season. Never practice him again, and see what he's got. I mean, if he hurts his back and hurts his neck and has to retire, okay. I mean, yeah, that's what he's got to do. So that makes sense. Sit him for the first 10 weeks.
Yeah, I don't know what else. I think anything you get from Dee Ford is just got to be looked at as a bonus. I don't think you can go into the season with the expectation that you're going to get anything from him.
Right.
I think the way that his contract was built is because they were going to owe him all that money if they cut him anyway. So they just made it so that they gave him the money and kind of split it up over a couple of years so that it helped them out with their salary cap number for this year. So. As much as I like to see him play, I don't necessarily think he's going to be able to do it.
It just seems to me like they'd cut him if they could, but they can't. And the best they could do was reduce his salary this year down to 8.9. His cap number was way higher, but in doing so, they had to extend the year on his deal. I think it's voidable, and they had this 8.9 million is fully guaranteed. So, what's the point of cutting him? I mean, you got to give him 8.9 million. And you might as well throw him out in the field at some point. The question is when. You could do it week 1, but maybe that's what they did last year. It didn't work. I like the idea. Save it till the second half of the season. Save it till the playoffs. They may not make the playoffs, but I guess the longer you wait, the better. And it's just Jed York's problem that he has to keep cutting game checks for the guy to stand there. But that's Jed's problem.
Yeah, if they can, the one I always keep going back to is Charles Haley. I think it was 98 when the 49ers brought him back out of mothballs at the end of the season, and signed him for the playoff game against the Packers.
Yeah.
Right. That's kind of the role, but because he's on the roster, they've got to figure out some way of carrying him, because I know they can put him on injured reserve to be brought back at some point or whatever. It'll just be interesting to see. I don't know all the rules around it, but I know that there's a way that you can get 2 extra guys on your roster.
Hold on. I'm putting one more extra topic on. I'm getting all the ideas are coming to me now. Hold on.
That's all right.
We have a lot of experience coming up with blog topics in the off season. Jack and I have been doing this since blogs were the thing, kids. You don't know about blogs, but Hold on. Okay. I'm sticking on the D-line. It's very interesting to me. We got Jason Verrett openly recruiting Melvin Ingram on Twitter.
Oh, yes.
Openly recruiting. They're old teammates. They both played together on the Chargers. You got Jason Verrett saying, come sign with us. Those dreads would look great in red and gold. Isn't that what he said?
Yeah, something along those lines. Yep.
Well, that's interesting because the Niners certainly don't have the cap space for him, but they can make it. They can create it.
Right. At this point, I don't think they have the numbers, but they're going to have to. If only they had some way they could create $23 million in cap space, to bring that guy in, that'd be nice. I don't think it's going to cost $23 million, obviously, but I think he's probably going to cost $7 to $10 million.
I would think so. I would think so. Yeah. So hold on. I don't have the right thing up. I don't have the right banner up. There it is. Sorry about that. Okay. So yeah, it seems to me like these players aren't dumb. Jason Verrett's very smart. He understands what the Niners salary cap situation is. I think they understand that the Niners have $17 million in cap space, but Trey Lance hasn't signed. Trey Sermon hasn't signed. Ambry Thomas hasn't signed. Fred Warner essentially hasn't signed. There's not much left. Melvin Ingram is freaking expensive. He's one of the top free agents left, and he could command $10 million. So I think Jason Verrett has to understand all that. And for him to be throwing this out publicly, there must be a little sentiment in the locker room that Trey Lance just might win this competition and that Jimmy Garoppolo could be gone. I think it's not lost on him, the financials of this team. He just signed with this team. He knows what's up.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and you're right, because right now, if they after they sign their draft picks, they only have about $7 million left, and they want to keep about 3 or 4 of that to kind of have if they need to bring a guy in cheap off the street during the season like they did last year. So yeah, they're going to be coming up with money somewhere. There's some guys that you can restructure, but I don't know if you want to add years. We just got done talking about Arik Armstead. I don't know if you want to add years to his deal at this point, even though you could, to lower his cap number. Jimmy Ward might be a guy that you want to do that with, but even he's at $9 million this year. If you want to keep him around for a couple of years, maybe you do that. Otherwise, it's definitely Garoppolo. And I think, to your point, I think if there might be those guys are out there, they're seeing him work all day long. They're seeing him work a lot more than the writers got to see during OTAs. And if, based off of everything we're hearing, it sure sounds like things are really pointing and trending up for Trey Lance.
Doesn't it sound like a really good first impression from Trey Lance? Everyone sounds so impressed. Like at the beginning, everyone was saying, hey, Jimmy Garoppolo looks great. And then OTAs went all the way through and everyone's like, hey, that Trey Lance guy's a hell of an athlete. Hey, he really picked up the offense very quickly. I mean, everyone said that, right?
Yeah, everybody did. And that's, I don't understand why there's some people that are so surprised by that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Jimmy Garoppolo picked it up and was playing in games in 6 weeks. I'm pretty sure that the guy who's as smart as they talk about with Lance, that he could pick this offense up. When you go back and I've said this a few times, this offense isn't difficult from an execution standpoint. It's from a verbiage standpoint and a language standpoint, and that all plays right into what Trey Lance does best.
So let's come back to Ingram real quick. Here's the selling point to him. 1, you played with Jason Verrett. 2, you already live in California. You don't have to move too far. 3, you've played across from a Bosa for a long time. Shouldn't be too hard. In a similar system. I mean, that's Gus Bradley down there. It's very similar. So he should be interested, and I'm sure the Niners could make him an offer he couldn't refuse. My thing is he really the edge rusher you want of all the guys who are available? He missed 9 games last year. Mm-hmm. And I don't take that lightly, especially with this team. I like Justin Houston. Justin Houston's only 32 years old. He didn't miss a game the last 2 years. He has missed time in the past. I don't know. Who would you go with if it were all the same, money-wise?
Well, the nice part about Ingram is, like you just said, he's in California, so it's just it's a 1 hour plane ride up here, and he's on the field, and he knows, and he has that Bosa history. That's another really good point that I hadn't really thought of, but that's a big deal too. Right. So, and like you said, he missed a lot of time last year. If he can make that up this year, he could have a comeback season. I mean, the Flyers have kind of done that, right? With a number of guys already that they have on the roster this year. That's what they're doing with Jaquiski Tartt. They're kind of doing that in a way with Jason Verrett. They're doing that across, all over the place with guys who've had injury history, and they're hoping that they can make it through this year.
The last thing I want to say before we move on, when a player like this comes out and speaks out of turn, basically starts recruiting. Now I know A.J. Brown did it with Julio Jones, but on this team, is it because Jason Verrett just had a bright idea, or is this the whispers around the organization? Hey, they might. Did you hear that they're thinking? I heard I know a guy who knows a guy who says they're going to sign him. I don't know. It just sounds like, was this an epiphany, or was this like, I don't know, a rumor? That's from
I would say that I don't think these guys just throw that kind of stuff out in the openly like that without really thinking it through before they do it.
Without thinking that it actually could happen.
Right.
Raymond Martinez Jr. says, Grant, what was locker room vibe like when Colin played his first game? Was it clear they knew he'd be the starter going forward? Made me similar to Trey. Hey, I don't know if you remember it, but it was at Candlestick. They played the Bears. Did you watch the post-game press conferences? I was in them. The players were giddy. Like, Vernon Davis was almost giggling. He was like, man, this guy, he compared him to Tom Brady. I don't know if you remember that. He kind of throws like Tom Brady. They were giddy. I'm telling you, and Vernon Davis was as loyal to Alex Smith as anyone. They came up together, but they're athletes too. They got to have a recognition and respect for performance. And there was no question after Colin Kaepernick did what he did that Alex just couldn't play that way at that time.
Yeah, and I remember that game, and that was all of a sudden when Colin Kaepernick hit the field, all of a sudden the ball's flying down the field and big plays are happening that we hadn't seen before. As you're talking about, I think there was a big shot down the left sideline to Davis early in the first quarter, right at the beginning of it. I know he hit
touchdown to Davis, I think. Yep.
And I think he hit Kyle
Williams,
return guy. Kyle Williams for a deep one too. So, he started, that's the difference. And that's what we're seeing now too, right? We've had the 49ers have had Jimmy Garoppolo, who's really worked underneath for so long. And now they've got a guy who can really get the ball down the field on the outside. And it just changes everything about the defense.
Yes, absolutely. If you remember that week, Jim Harbaugh didn't say that Colin Kaepernick was going to be the starter. And all the beat writers got it wrong and said that Alex Smith was going to be the starter. God love him. I'm sorry, but they just got it wrong. I think Harbaugh misled him a little bit. Alex Smith was out there at practices and he didn't have the concussion thing on and they thought he was going to play. And at the very last minute, maybe like the day before it was announced, Alex Smith is out with a concussion. Might have been news to him. Colin Kaepernick's in. And all the narrative at the time was, well, he's not even prepared to play. They're just going to run the ball. They're going to come out and run the ball, right? And they came out throwing on the first. It was like 20-yard pass, 20-yard pass, 20-yard pass, touchdown. Like, oh, this is going to be a blowout. And they have a lot of confidence in Colin Kaepernick. Like, we had no idea. They didn't call plays like that for Alex Smith. And all of a sudden, whoa. And everyone was like, wow, I like the way this feels. This is really easy. We don't have to win 13-7 anymore. So that's the way I remember it.
Yeah, I remember. If I remember that correctly, I think the decision actually got broke to the media and everything that Monday morning.
That's right.
And that Kaepernick had found out about it Sunday night and everything, and the quarterbacks had found out about it Sunday night. But it got broke to everybody early Monday morning. Because if I recall, and this is going back to the old blog, but you're right. That was big news. And I remember all the talk of they're going to run the ball, they're going to do all the thing. And I remember sending you an email and saying, I think Kaepernick's going to blow it out tonight.
You did.
And you
did. I remember that. You absolutely did that. Yes.
Yeah. And you said, and you agreed with me. And he just came out and it was a totally different situation. And it just opened everything up for the 49ers. That's why they did so well the next 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's how it went. That's the story of that. Is there anything else you want to say about that?
No, I could see going back to Lance. I can see Lance having that. Lance isn't going to have that benefit of being a surprise starter week one, but you can see, based off if he can come out based off of what you saw of his ability to throw deep down the sidelines and stuff like that. If he is doing as well as kind of what we've already heard, it's going to be. I think it's going to be his team week one.
Yeah, that's why I think he's going to take this job. I mean, he's not going to be perfect. He's going to miss some passes high, Jack. That's okay because he's going to make plays with his legs. He's going to throw some passes down the field, and he's just going to, as coaches say, flash enough in preseason that fans will fall in love. And they'll be as against Jimmy Garoppolo starting as they were against Mac Jones being the pick at 3. That's my prediction. They're going to fall in love with this kid as soon as they see him. Because I've seen him. They haven't seen him yet. And the players have seen him, and the coaches have seen him. You hear how they're talking about him now. No one talks about Jimmy anymore. It's over. But you haven't seen him yourself. So just wait till preseason. You'll be like, oh, my God, we haven't seen a quarterback do anything like this since Steve Young. Really, he's even more impressive than Colin Kaepernick athletically. Quicker release, all of it.
Yeah, and everything talking about just takes me right back to 2012 because if you remember, we hadn't really seen Kaepernick on the field at all in 2011, but in 2012, and I think it was week 3 of the preseason, or maybe it was even week 4. I remember which one it was, but he went out there and he absolutely obliterated the defense with some extended playing time. And I think it was the last preseason game, and people at that point got super excited. And it really kind of that's what really set the ball in motion. And then I think because then you started seeing the packages get put in for him during the season, and it built up until the point where they had an opportunity to put him in, and that was it. Didn't really matter it didn't matter that Smith was playing some of the best football of his career when he got hurt.
That's true. Last thing I wanted to say about that was you're right. I think the news got broken the morning of the game. It was a Monday night game. And the local beat writers were so flabbergasted that they were led astray that the first question at the post-game press conference was from Matt Mayoko, and he said, Jim, can you take me through the timeline of making this decision? Because they still couldn't get their mind around what had happened. And I got the second question. And I was on SportsCenter, and I said, Jim, is Colin Kaepernick your starting quarterback going forward? That was the question. And Jim said, I believe in going with the hot hand, which is one of his most famous all-time quotes as head coach of the 49ers. I got to ask that question. That was me, and that was Harbaugh. So, I was so happy in that moment. I was like, oh, my God, Matt Mayoko just fumbled. He fumbled. Hey, nothing but respect to Matt Mayoko. He's the best. But on that one particular moment, he fumbled, and I recovered, and I scooped it up and scored. Yeah,
definitely. That's a big win.
I love you, Matt. I love you. You're way better than me at this profession. I'm just giving you a hard time. All right, last one. How Trey Lance will bring more juice to the 49ers offense. Juice in quotation marks. What does this mean, Jack?
Yeah, I think if you go back and you watch what Trey Lance did at North Dakota State, it just seems to me like you're going to be seeing a lot of Kyle Juszczyk in this offense in 2021, not just being on the field, but I think you're going to see the ball in his hands probably more than we've ever seen him be utilized. Because now all of a sudden you've got a quarterback that can run that play action, game, not only play action but bootleg out to where he's going to have Juszczyk in the flat, and that's going to be really his go-to guy. He'll have a second level guy, which will probably be Kittle. But if you go back and watch, if you go back and watch Trey Lance at North Dakota State, he used that fullback a lot off of that play action rollout kind of game. And I think we're going to see a lot more of Kyle Juszczyk, or we could see a lot more of him this year than we've ever seen in the past. It'd be huge for the 49ers offense, I think, especially for a guy who has been underutilized in that way.
The big difference between Trey Lance and Colin Kaepernick is that Trey Lance checks down all the time. He likes to check down, and it's not. I don't have a problem with it because he also takes shots. He has the, he has every shot in his bag. It's not like Colin Kaepernick, who one of the big criticisms of his was he has like limited clubs in his bag, to use a golf metaphor. All of his shots are kind of the same. Jimmy Garoppolo has limited range. Alex Smith had limited ability to pull the trigger. He was a little hesitant at times. I don't know if this guy's going to be like that hesitant, but if he is hesitant, if he holds on to the ball and doesn't like it, he can either check down and make a good decision or make himself the runner. I like his decision-making very much. It's one of the things that's so intriguing about him.
Yeah, one of the knocks against him that you see from people, during the draft process and in looking at him was that he doesn't pull the trigger all the time, that he does play it safe, which is fine when you have everything, like you said, you have the ability to make all those plays. And so, again, you've got a guy like Kyle Juszczyk who deserves to have the ball more often. So go ahead and get the ball to him. Let him, in some ways it's going to be, we saw Garoppolo do it a little bit, but you're going to see it even more with Lance, because they're just going to be calling him, getting him out of the pocket more often. That's how they're, I think early in the season, especially, that's how you're going to want to use him, You're going to want to use him on easy underneath throws and, shot plays is how he's going to get the ball downfield. And then as the season wears on, it's going to change up. But I think early on, you're going to see him really work the ball underneath. And Juszczyk would be a huge benefit for him.
Yeah, I mean, with Jimmy, you can't get him on the move. It doesn't do anything for him. He's so slow. And he needs to get the ball out of his hands in 2.5 seconds. Otherwise, he's screwed. I mean, Trey Lance is the opposite. You want him on the move. You kind of want him outside the pocket. And you do want to cut the field in half for him. I mean, rolling him out and giving him one half of the field with a deep option, an underneath option, and a running and a keep it option, that's good for him. I mean, it would be good. That's what the Seahawks are going to be doing with Russell Wilson this year. They just brought in a guy from the Rams. That's what they're going to be doing. It's probably what the Cardinals should be doing. And, if Cliff Kingsbury fails this year, I predict it's what they're going to be doing next year. If Cliff Kingsbury fails this year, here's my prediction. Mike McDaniel. It's going to that's my prediction.
It makes sense.
Yeah. I think this is the best way to use Trey Lance. It's going to be how they use him. And we'll see if it works.
Yeah, I'm excited to see I would be excited to see Lance in the offense because I think, again, Juszczyk's going to be a big part of it, and the running backs overall, I think, are going to be utilized in that way more often.
And I think that's what the main point here. You think of Trey Lance, here comes his strong-armed, mobile quarterback, bombs away down the field like Colin Kaepernick. Sometimes. But actually, this guy is going to involve the fullback and the tailbacks in the passing game much more than Jimmy did, than Colin Kaepernick ever did, than Alex Smith did. I mean, this is going to be a big part of his game. I see it in practice. He throws to Elijah Mitchell all the time because that's who he's playing with. JaMychal Hasty, too. So, yeah, Kyle Juszczyk, you're finally going to get the involvement that you deserve that I've been arguing for so long. Congratulations. Good call, Jack.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
All right. Well, that's our show today. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. Thanks for going on a little early with me today, Jack. I had to reschedule the big guy, my dad, for 3 o'clock. So if you're not sick of me yet, 3 o'clock, Cohn Zone, we got some stuff to talk about. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks again, Jack.
Yeah, thank you.